Team USA, big announcement earlier today, and I talked about this in the last podcast a little bit with Keith Smith. So if you want our thoughts on that, either go back on the YouTube page or scroll back here on either Spotify, Apple, wherever it is that you listen to our podcast. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. We talked a little bit about this, but Team USA starting to turn into Team Celtics. 25% of Team USA is now Boston Celtics. Derrick White replaces Kawhi Leonard, which I want to get your take on this. I feel like Kawhi Leonard being on Team USA always had it never really passed the full sniff test, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
It was always a bit fraudulent. So Derrick White replaces Kawhi. Number one, do you agree that it was always a little bit fraudulent of Kawhi being on Team USA? And then number two, your thoughts on Derrick White getting the call to replace him?
Yes, for the first question. I just thought it was going to be impossible for him to actually play for the team just because
this was
of the
always
injuries.
The ending, right? How else was this going to end? This
exactly.
is where it was always going.
It felt inevitable the minute we found out that Kawhi was going to be on the team. And like, I don't know. I think that's one of the bigger questions with the US in general. It's because they have an older team. So how are they going to manage some of the older guys versus the younger guys on the roster, minute loads with Embiid and KD, who apparently has a calf injury, like all that, I think is a valid aspect to look at for this US team, especially when you gauge them next to the rest of the competition in the tournament, right? Like they are a very veteran team that is going up against probably some of the best talent in the world. So how does that work? And for Kawhi, yeah, that makes sense. Like I'm not surprised at all. On the Derrick White front, I don't think anybody was surprised except Jaylen Brown. Hey, we're on a Celtics version of a podcast. We got to talk about this.
Man.
You know what I mean? How do you feel that it wasn't? Yeah. How do you feel that it wasn't JB? Because look, you're missing the finals MVP, technically Eastern Conference Finals MVP too. You take Derrick White instead of him. I think Jaylen Brown would have been a more clean fit in terms of the replacement for Kawhi. Like if you're looking for Kawhi's type of skill set on the wings, would have made sense to add Jaylen Brown. So I am surprised that it was Derrick White. Maybe Jaylen Brown wasn't even consideration, but I don't know. It seemed like from Twitter, he wasn't too happy with it.
Right. It's kind of weird. And I think you're totally right. If it's a 1-to-1 replacement, Jaylen Brown is a similar player to Kawhi Leonard. So if you're just looking for that, that's what makes more sense. To your point of, was he even in consideration? You know, I brought this up in that episode with Keith, where when you go back to whenever they announced the pool of players that they were going to select from, which I think was like, 3/4 of the way through the season, maybe whatever, towards the end of the season, Jaylen Brown wasn't even in that pool, which was kind of disrespectful, if I'm being honest. So we start there. So he wasn't even in that. And I have no idea how strictly Grant Hill and Team USA Olympic Committee, they stick to that pool, but he was never in that. So I was surprised. I wasn't surprised that he wasn't going to get the call. And it was even reported, I think during the finals, that, hey, if Kawhi can't go, Derrick White might get the nod. And so, I think Jaylen Brown would have been a better 1-to-1 fit for Kawhi. But as I said, the Kawhi fit always was a little bit fraudulent to me. And I think when you look at this roster for USA anyways, there's a lot of mouths to feed, man. There's a lot of guys that are going to have reputations, that have certain statuses. Like this is the last go round for, as you said, there's a lot of senior USA guys. I think the way USA tried to stack this team was you had the senior guys that you're not saying no to Steph Curry. You're not saying no to LeBron. You're not saying no to KD, AD. And, if Embiid wants to play for you versus France, you're going to keep him away from France. And you'll say, yeah, come play for the US. Yeah. So there were a couple guys that either haven't always been in the mix for USA that decided they wanted to be. So US was like, kind of like, all right, let's do this. But what that created, as I think, just what would have been a lot of difficult decisions to have to make on playing time. And so you bring in Derrick White, and let's just be real. Derrick White is likely a guy that if he doesn't play, I'm not going to say he's not going to care. He's a competitor. He probably wants to play, but he's also not going to be like, man, my reputation's taking a hit that I'm not getting playing time over Steph Curry.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an easier, I think, chemistry team fit. Whereas Jaylen Brown, if you were to throw him in the mix, and if Kawhi was still there, it's like you're still figuring out how to stagger all these minutes where it feels like you're not disrespecting, whether or not, and that might not even be legit. This is basically an all-star team, but you're not disrespecting these guys. Whereas Derrick White's a superstar role player. This is what he does. Like, this is kind of where he's at. And so now him and Drew, and I think Drew's been an established Team USA guy, so they kind of wanted to keep that going. But I would guess Derrick White and Tyrese Halliburton are probably the two guys, if you look at that 12-man roster, that I would kind of expect, like, hey, if there's some games where you might not see them, and there's some games where maybe Derrick White needs more defense, or Steph Curry needs a break from handling the ball, and you see Tyrese Halliburton a little bit more. But those might be the two guys that don't play as much as the rest.
Yeah, you're probably right. And also, like we have to realize that it's 3 group games and then knockout stage, which is 2, maybe 3 games. And like that's it. That's all you got.
Yeah.
There's only 6 games. You know what I mean? It's not a 7-game series, and it's also 40 minutes. So you don't have as much minutes as you do in a basketball game in the NBA, where you got 48 minutes. You can sprinkle in a guy here and there. For what it's worth, I agree with you on the Derrick White front. Like as in terms of getting like a rotation player who doesn't necessarily need to dominate the ball or like look for his own shots, et cetera, et cetera. He's obviously like, he was a near all-star type of player last year, good shooter, all that stuff. I can rave about Derrick White all I want. And also like the point of attack
to, by the way, great podcast to do it on if you want to take that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the defense is the aspect where I think he's going to help massively, because now you have, I would say between Steph and Hallie, they had some legitimate holes at the point of attack. And now they have Drew and Derrick White, where it's like, if we need a stop, if there is on the other side, Canada, right? Canada's guard play is incredible. That's what they're going to lean on with SGA and Jamal Murray and all those stuff. Now you have the good counter to that with Drew Holiday and Derrick White. So like, if you need a stop, that's the lineup you're going to if you need one. Right. So yeah, I like it, man. It makes sense. I guess it's just funny to do the whole, ooh, is this going to cause drama in the Celtics locker room, all that type of thing. It's just a funny thing.
Hey, it's bulletin board material for Jaylen Brown. If if an Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals MVP can ever have motivation to come back, and this is it, we'll take it. 3 guys get some gold medals, maybe, and then we get Jaylen Brown with the motivation. So we'll see. But